Very gracious. My Lords, the Minister, you've emphasised the importance of now, and I just wanted to emphasise myself that these are not historic cases of grooming gangs abuse. If you actually look, the rape, the systematic sexual abuse of young women and girls is still happening, and we sometimes talk about it as though it was in the past, but it's happening now, which is why some of us get frustrated at a rather slower response. I just wanted to ask the Minister to reflect when he keeps saying, and also it was in the place, that there's a £5 million fund and councils can apply for it, as though it was something that they would want to apply for. The frustration is that the councils don't want to apply for the money because they're the people who are being accused of covering up the abuse in the first place. And so they're not exactly like queuing up going, give me some money so I can look into myself. That's why I think that so many of the victims from Rochdale, from Bradford, from Huddersfield, from Oxford and so on, feel so frustrated. They feel like they're banging their head against a brick wall. And secondly, I think that the point about the mandatory reporting, which, by the way, I personally have reservations about mandatory reporting, but in the instances of the grooming gangs, the reports were made. People knew about it. They were made to people in social services, to education and so on, and the reports were ignored. They were covered up. People looked the other way. And so what we're talking about is, when you say we've got immediate solutions like mandatory reporting or a £5 million fund, it just sounds like you're talking about a different issue. Or just one final thing, I suppose. They are gangs, not just arbitrary individuals. And just as exactly like with child abuse in the church, we didn't shy away from recognising particular specific child abuse scandals, it didn't mean that I then thought everybody in the Church of England or every Catholic was an abuser. We shouldn't shy away from the particular ethnicity and religion of these gangs now, because it doesn't mean we're saying that all people of that religion or ethnicity are paedophile, rapists. Of course not. But let's be frightened to say the truth.
I'm grateful to the Noble Baroness's contribution, as ever. I'll just say to her, genuinely, since the election, a new child sexual abuse police performance framework is being developed. We've put in place legislation now, which will be before this House shortly, on online offending, abuse and grooming enabling by artificial intelligence. We've put in place new performance powers for border force to detect digitally held child sex abuses at the border. We're putting new restrictions on sex offenders from changing their names. We're increasing investment in law enforcement capability through police undercover online network and tackling organised exploitation programmes. And those are things that are before the House now. And again, the government has had to both develop at policy level, put into legislation, and is now taking those matters through both houses of Parliament. So that, slow that it might seem, it's actually, from my experience of 14 years as a minister nearly now, over two sets of governments, it's actually quite a speedy process. It's quite a speedy process. And by the end of this year, we should have legislation in place to deal with a whole range of issues which are currently being recommended to us and which are important areas which will help prevent and support victims. She mentions mandatory reporting. Yes, it is there, and yes, it was ignored. The difference now is in the legislation before the House of Commons and soon to be before this House, there will be sanctions against those who fail to undertake mandatory reporting, professional sanctions on those individuals. That isn't the case currently, and that's why, again, we're strengthening the regime on mandatory reporting to try to ensure that we do beef it up to hold people to account if they do fail to report incidences of sexual abuse that come before them. And she is right. We shouldn't ignore where areas are undertaken from particular ethnic minorities. But the point I simply make is we should tackle sexual abuse of children wherever it comes from. And if there are particular lessons to be learned from the grooming gangs issue, that's what Louise Casey's report will bring to us very shortly. That's what the police are looking at now through a historical reassessment of the cases. And that's what we've asked HM constabulary to examine as well. So again, I simply say to her that, you know, there are things that she thinks may not be happening, but I hope she can trust us that there are positive actions being taken by the government on these issues, and there'll be further reports back and legislation through this House during the course of the next few months.